All right. So far you guys have spent about seven hours or so, disassembly, reassembly, something 7 to 8 hours. So that's pretty good from a standpoint of like a learning process and going through it. Some of you have been successful, some of you are still struggling and fighting with it, but you start to know when you're making the mistake. You start to feel it. You start to know, did I get this head right? Is it straight? And that's all about practice and experience. Once you've done it once, even if it's just one time on one drive, the process is the same for all of them. And really at that point in time, I can't teach you any more about the physical side other than experience. You just constantly need to disassemble and reassemble drives. Get used to seeing how they look like. If you get a new drive, something you haven't seen before, and you're not feeling good about it, get another one and go do it. And make sure that you feel comfortable disassembling and reassembling. Do exactly the same process we've done here, and it will help you in the long run do it again. So you don't play on the client's drive from that standpoint. Play on other drives. And even if it's at your expense, you're going to earn a skill that you can then apply to 20 other drives when you've gotten those in. And it might be your niche. It might be where you go. So now, here's the problem though. That's only a small, tiny piece of the job. That's literally the, I mean, if you don't get the drive working, you get no data. So you do have to do that. There's no other way around it. So, but there's a lot to know ahead of time, and there's a lot to deal with it afterwards. So once you've started getting images, as you guys have already seen from dealing with the Deepspar, you don't get a perfect image a lot of times. A lot of times your passes, you're going back and forward, you're whittling it away. Maybe you get 99% of the drive, you don't get 100% of the drive. You've got corruption, you've got things you've got to deal with. So that's what I want to talk about now. I want to get into the logical side. So let's pretend at this point that we've all had a drive, we've imaged it. Now we're starting here with the data. And so we're going to do today with data, and we're going to get, basically I'm going to mostly focus on Windows. I'm going to briefly hit the Mac stuff because there's really not a big mystery in a lot of the Mac stuff. It's literally the same kind of layout, same structure, same thing. The HFS is different, but they're actually very similar, and they were developed about the same period of time with regards to, we have a registry and we have a catalog and we have other stuff, and they have node IDs, and you know, the current system is basically based on Linux files, a Unix file system. Linux isn't the right word. But it's only because it's encapsulated the attributes and the things from the 1983, 1984 when it was being developed. So we'll go into that a little bit. Today's worst nightmare is APFS. And I've added some stuff on the thumb drive, so when you get the thumb drive, I'll tell you another directory to copy. There's a new white paper that came out on APFS and how Apple's new file system works. It's not well understood. There's a lot of things that people don't know, and there's a lot of things that aren't working correctly on their file system now. So even Apple's having certain problems with backups and Time Machine and segments not copying and pointing to the right files. There's a couple of problems. I'm not in a hurry to go to it or to use it, and there hasn't been a lot of cases that have it in it, and we only have like 3 or 4 tools that actually even talk about it or use it at this point. There's only a handful, and they're all in beta. I feel like APFS is in beta. It's really not ready for prime time, the problems that are occurring and things that are happening. And we've had APFS on our phones since anybody who has an iPhone at 10.3, they changed it over to APFS. But the thing about the phones is we're only seeing logical anyway. We don't see the file system. We can't even copy the file system on the phone. So the fact that it's running and it's dealing with a handful of files is not a big deal. It's when it's on a PC or a laptop, that's the problem. That's where we're messing with stuff and we have problems. All right, so we're going to start here. We're going to go through this today. Then we're going to come back again, and we're going to do all the stuff for the next 2 days. So tomorrow and Friday are all about disassembly and reassembly, getting good at doing drives, understanding the Deepspar, and doing the full complete copy. Okay? So at this point in time, let's say you have imaged your drive. You took your drive, you disassembled it, you reassembled it, you put it on the Deepspar, and you were able to get an image. Where is the image? It's on the destination drive. So at that point in time, that's where we haven't gone yet. Basically, you're picking up the destination drive. At that point in time, you should have an exact copy, a duplicate of or as close to it as possible, that is able to be made of your client's data on your destination. And you're turning everything off, and you're treating the destination now as the client's data. And now you're processing that. So you have to deal with corruption and files. What are you looking for? Where are we processing data? How do we get around different types of problems that, you know, most people, when they first see a problem and the file systems won't mount or something bad happens, they just carve. I see forensics people do it all the time. It's a terrible method of doing things. There's sometimes we have to carve, but I'm working as hard as I can to get to that file system. If you don't get to the file system, you will definitely lose content. And when I say file system, you have data, and your data is the same. It's pretty much the same on every file system that you're on. So if you have JPEG over here on a Mac, it's the same. It's FFD8 sitting on a Mac to the end, FFD9, it's raw data sitting on raw space. All of the stuff that makes up your file system is basically encapsulated in metadata. It's all about dates and times and file structure and directory, and then they just have a pointer that points to where the data is. There is no real fundamental difference between any of those except for encryption or compression and things like that. But for the most part, I think of them all kind of the same, like I do with hard drives. That's why APFS scares me, because APFS is nothing like any of the others. It uses pools and shared data, and it's kind of like when I described the Exchange server yesterday. I described you have an email, and the email has a counter, and the counter just points to all the people that have that same email till it deletes it and it's gone. Well, that's what APFS does. If you have a file, it doesn't duplicate that file when you copy that file. It's trying to keep a usable space to a minimum. It just duplicates pointers to segments of that file or changes to that file and data from that file. So it's not the same. And when you're dealing with it in raw space, it's not the same. So it's the one that's different than all the others. Otherwise, there's not a big fundamental difference in any of the others. So let's go through this. So we're still in this phase. We still need to be able to do all of these things, understand the drive, go through the drive, image the drive, get a copy of it, do repair. But we're stepping to here right now. So right now, we're heading into 4/5. So 5 is a lot of one-off stuff. It's things that individual files are damaged, certain things that you're going to have to do to repair stuff. Now, I wrote this class as basically a business class, people who are trying to do data recovery. So I did have a couple of slides in here that were basically from the business perspective. They do apply to you government agents and police and everybody as well, because there's also a lot of things that are very similar. Even though you may work for somebody, if you're not good at your job, eventually you get fired. You always have to justify why they have you. And on top of that, most of your bosses know nothing about what you do. They have no clue what you actually do as a data recovery, a forensics guy, anything. They only rate things by success on court cases or filings and things like that. They don't know what you know about hard drives. So you're always having to document. And this is the same old thing with any job. If you don't document what you do and you don't hand it over to somebody so they can see it, and you're not always bragging about yourself, which seems terrible because it seems egotistical all the time, but that's how you're selling yourself. People don't know what you know. There's no such thing as job security. It's actually the opposite. In my opinion, if you save information and you're the only guy who knows it, and you're trying to keep it to yourself so no one else knows what you know, you're stuck. You can't go anywhere. If you tell everybody, in my opinion, I mean, I've done this for years, so I can tell you it's true. If I tell everybody everything I know, they'll go, I don't want to do that. And they give it to me anyway, right? So that's pretty much what happens. I'm just saying, you can never move ahead. You can never do anything else, and no one else will ever know what you know. It's advertising for yourself. So in my opinion, if you are a boss or you have a boss or you have something, you have to keep track of these things. You have to tell your clients. You have to tell everybody. So I don't think I'm egocentric. I think I'm selling myself. I mean, I'm trying to show people you can do this. And I tell everybody I don't know everything, but I'll tell you what I do know. So here's the things. First, don't be emotional. Now, police and stuff usually know this because they won't let you work on a case that you're involved in or that you have some sort of conflict with a lot of times because you make bad judgment calls. They're not always because you're trying to, give the guy a freebie or something like that, but they're bad judgment calls, and you'll do things that you do not expect. If you have a hard drive from your mom, you'll do things for your mom's hard drive that you wouldn't have done if it was a client's hard drive, and you'll take more risks. You'll try to do things quicker. You'll try to show off and things like that. Your client's hard drive, most of the time, you're in a room alone working on it. Nobody's watching you, and there's nobody to prove what happened. So I'm just saying, if you're emotionally attached to something, you have to reconsider. And you may not have a choice. You may be the guy they hand it to, but I'm going to tell you, try to separate your feelings. Try to separate your job from that. It doesn't help if while you're working on a hard drive that your tears are hitting it. I'm just saying that's not going to help you. So try to remove yourself from that as much as possible. There is no such thing as doing something fast. Now, there's going to be people who are going to beg you to do it fast. People call me and they say, listen, I need this by tomorrow. How about if I just, give you an extra? Like, I've actually had them literally say, I will pay you, all night long to work on this thing. Like, it doesn't matter if you pay me all night long. There's only so fast this drive's going to go. There's only so much it can do. It's not me. It's it. Once I get it running, and you will see this happen, there's a lot of times your drive will be copying really, really slow. But it's copying. It is getting data. And people think they can do something to speed it up. And you are going to feel horrendously bad the second that you have disconnected it, hooked it up to something else you think can make it faster, and you can't get it at all anymore. You were getting the copy. Now you're getting nothing. And it never comes back. There's a lot of people that kick their ass when they do it, right? And you guys probably even have a rule, right? You guys have a rule that's like, if you get it copying, don't touch it. Walk away. Walk away. Once you got it going, you do not touch it. Even if it's going slow. There might be some judgment calls you can make on like DMA and UDMA, but generally it's not going to go faster. Most of the time, whatever that drive is doing is the best it can do. Okay? It's only going to get worse. So make sure and set the expectations of the people that you're working with. Make sure they understand, listen, this is going to take 5 days. This is going to take 7 days. It's not going to be done tomorrow. If you have that one job that you're the hot shot and you got to do the payroll by tomorrow, I mean, it's a gamble. You're gambling. I'm going to spend 3 hours. I'm going to try to get it. If I don't get it by tomorrow at noon, I don't get paid. Okay, well, that's the way it is. You can take that shot. And I'm going to go through that today. I'm going to go through things to do faster. What happens if you have to work on an original hard drive? What happens if you're on an oil rig in the middle of the Gulf and it's going down, but if you save this one environmental fire, you can turn off the, on the hallow system, shut it down so that no fire exists. I'm going to try to do that today so that you get an idea about some of that. Damaged hard drives do not do the same thing twice. So you might get one working, you shut it down, it doesn't work again. You take it away, you unplug it, you move it, it doesn't work again. You don't have space on this network drive or this system to copy it to, so you unplug it, move it over here. Don't count on it doing the same thing twice. It's not going to do the same thing twice. So the best advice I can give you is literally stop and walk away. If it starts to copy and you've touched something, be ready at all times. So if a hard drive comes in a box from FedEx, we have this process, we call it the FedEx freeze. When a drive gets put in a box in California and comes to Georgia, it goes up in a plane. And then they bring it down and they give it to me. And the pressure changes it, the temperature changes it, it's in a cargo area. And so basically it's technically getting frozen just like it would be in your freezer or something like that. It comes into the office, open the box. Amazingly, it seems like it works fine. The client told me horrible stories about how it didn't work. And now you plug it in and it's working. It's not going to keep working. I promise. It's not going to keep working. So you make sure you're ready wherever you plugged it in. The second that it came up that you thought you were just doing a test, you're imaging. You get ready. You don't do anything you're not ready to do. If you're touching that drive and you're plugging it in somewhere, you be ready 100% of the time. Understand? There's no unplug, plug, move. Okay.
Triage turns into
right. Now, yeah, it turns in from an easy job to a super hard job at that point. I'm going to take the low-hanging fruit as much as possible. Anytime I can, I'm going to be going for the short story. So, and I know a lot of law enforcement officers know this because that is kind of their rule. They have, more time than most other people have in some cases. But if you're getting something, something's better than nothing, always. No matter what it is. And your clients are going to want to be faster. Your clients are going to be like, I need it Friday. Well, don't let them tell you they need it Friday most of the time. Most of the time you're going to have to say, you know, at least you're going to have your pictures of your mom who died 6 years ago. Otherwise, you're not going to have those pictures, because I'm going to do something that's going to destroy it and you'll never see them again. That's what happens. All right. I know when you're going to win. It's always the next time you try as hard as you can. Because if you gave up, you're never trying again. It is about persistence. This job, the one thing that makes you better than everybody else is trying harder than everybody else. Everybody else gave up. They're already done. I didn't give up. I come back. I mean, I might try 6 other things. I put it on the shelf. I take a break. I come back on Monday, put it back on and try it again. Is it a bad business decision? Yes. It's a terrible business decision. But I feel bad not doing ethically for my client what I can do. I'll do everything I can possibly do to get it. So even sometimes at my detriment, I win a lot and then I earn trust and I earn respect for it. But, you know, those don't always pay the bills. But I'm going to tell you that that's what I feel like. I feel like I have to try harder than anybody else. So when somebody gives me crap about it, I'm like, listen, you could give it to the other guy and he'll just tell you I'm done. No, hand it back to you. You can go send it to $300 data recovery dude. He'll do that. But I'm taking a week longer because I'm trying a week longer. If you don't understand, here's your drum. So time's never your friend. Free space is not your friend. Is your friend. You want to always have free space. You always need extra space. Do not delete anything you've ever copied. If you start to copy a hard drive and you've got a directory and you're copying those files to that hard drive and it dies, and now you're like, well, I got it restarted, I'm going to copy it again, but that's taking up space and I don't want to blah, blah, blah. Don't erase it. Make a past 2 directory. Put all the data in the past 2 directory, and then you can merge those 2 together later on. But there's going to be some time you're going to end up with like 8 passes, and they're going to merge them all together, and then you'll have one good recovery. But things don't always go as smoothly as you're expecting them to. But do not delete stuff. Space is your friend. You do not, I mean, I can't even tell you how much I got in space everywhere. I'd never erase anything. I'm really bad about that. I don't ever erase anything, even when it's done and old, or, you know, I've got copies of everything everywhere I can possibly ever do. So now this one, sometimes he is and is not your friend. It works back and forth. Like we talked about those Fujitsu drives at the beginning of the class, that you have to heat them up in order for them to work. Sometimes like SSDs and solid state and stuff like that, they work better when you get them warm than they do when they're cold. And you know, like lithium batteries, they're better warm than they are cold. So those kind of things sometimes are helpful, but usually low temperatures. Like if you're going to do, like instead of the freezer, the opposite thing would be put it in your oven. If you're going to do that, you need it at like a 200 degree, like a low temperature, 200 degree Fahrenheit. So what is that in Celsius? 100, 112, something like that? 90 something. Huh? 90 something. Yeah. So just keep that in mind when you're doing something. You want to be very cautious. I use my infrared tool a lot of times to heat something up for just a few seconds, just to see if I can get some, but that's a surface tool, not an internal tool. Don't microwave it. Okay? Nothing works out of the microwave. It'll fry it. So bad guys, when police are coming in and the bad guys want to get rid of stuff, they throw them in the microwave, they turn it on, and if you see a memory stick that comes out of a microwave, what happens to it? You ever seen it? It crumbles. It literally, like you start to do something with the chip actually will just start to turn to dust. It'll just crumble and just fall apart. So microwaves are not good for SSD, for NAND, things like that. eBay. Don't make any enemies. I know it'll sometimes seem terrible and it'll seem like you just got shafted or you have to send something back and you're mad at the guy. But the day's going to come, there's only a handful of these vendors on eBay who constantly stock drives and talk to stuff, and they give you a bad score, and then somebody, you don't even see, if you get bad scoring on eBay, when vendors post stuff, they can choose, nobody that has a score higher than this can see my stuff. So they can stop you from even knowing what's on their site. Does that make sense? So just buy, exchange, get it done, get your money back if something bad happens or whatever else. But try to keep friends with those guys. Also, the other one is the brokers. So one of the best ones, and I deal with all the time, not that they don't have their problems, but DonorDrives.com. They're a company that started about 2013 or so. They started stocking hard drives, and so you can literally go and search their inventory. So they have inventory of just about everything that you want. Sometimes they don't have everything. Sometimes you still have to go to eBay and hunt something down, or you got to find another vendor or something like that. But they do at least have stock and have those things that you can actually compare, and they're labeling stuff pretty well. They've also done, and this comes from a number of sources, and I've had my own sources and done this for years, but theirs has actually gotten better as they've done it, is they have this donor matching guide. So their donor matching guide, again, some of it's based on stuff that's been around for years. I wrote some papers on some stuff a couple of years ago about matching drives, but they've seen more than I have at this point, and they've actually done a pretty good job of writing in their paper on their site how to match donor drives. So they'll take apart the label, and so like I know certain things like, you know, the family, what the code is, how fast the drive spin, what the interface is. All of that stuff is in these codes. So you can actually tell this is a 7200 RPM with 2 megs of cache on the BB side. Here's a OEM code, so you don't need the OEM code. That's just who they sold it to. This is your family code, and then your ROM code. So there's things like that that's all in there, and they have actually defined all of this. So I say this is a fantastic guide to go to look for donor drives that you don't know. They'll go through it, just about every brand, everything that they're selling, to try to tell you how to match it and do it. Deepspar tried, and I don't think they're been very successful with theirs. Theirs was, let me use my Deepspar to read some content, upload it to the site, see how many heads and all the other stuff I have, and then it can pick out. But I don't think anybody's really using it. Have you seen anybody using it? You know what I'm talking about?
I haven't.
Yeah, they have their own Deepspar version where it tries to compare it from internal data. But these guys are working also with PC3000, so they have a thing where if PC3000 can pull the data, that it can compare it to their database and then tell you which drives they actually have. So they're actually working with ACE in that vicinity as well. And they've just started doing solid state. They're not very far, but this is the problem with eBay. If you need to go find one of these in a donor, it's super difficult to find because they're selling this package with this plastic on it, and when you open that plastic, you don't know what's inside. So these guys have gotten smart, and they're opening up all the chipsets, and they're showing you pictures of your chipsets, and then actually labeling them with what those ID numbers are. So I hope they do well, and they keep doing a great job, because this has now become a pretty good resource for us to find something quickly. It may not be the cheapest. They do have a VIP thing too. You can join their VIP and they do free shipping, or they have some sort of a discount or something off of shipping. I don't remember what it is because I have Allison handle all that stuff. But at least from that standpoint, they actually have like a little group thing. It's like 50 bucks or something to join or something, and then you get discounts on stuff. So keep these things in mind. This is how I would find donors. And then besides just telling you a lot of things about donors, I'm going to tell you that their donor matching guide is really good now at this point. It has more information on it than it does at HDD Guru, even in my book or any of my stuff. The only thing I would probably say, and they might not tell you, let me see if they've added that yet about IBM drives. There's one thing about IBM's PCBs. Let's see if it's on here. Nope, I don't see it. There's one thing about IBM's they still haven't added. And if I was going to match a donor drive and I needed a board on a Death Star, on a Hitachi IBM drive, the way that you know if this board is exactly the same as another board is there's a little barcode right here, a little square, the first 2 rows, the top 2 rows of the barcode, the text on the 2 rows must match. If you get that 100%, the board is 100% match. It may take you longer to find a perfect match, but that's what you want to see. Anybody selling something on eBay or whatever else that you need a board for, if you're just searching for a working board. Now, I don't buy Western Digital boards. I buy the whole drive. Any other drive, you can probably buy a board and be fine, but on a Western Digital, they have a problem with some of their boards, and you can't tell if the board works without the original drive. So you have to be able to read the beginning, the middle, and the end of the drive in order to know if it's working, because they have like a high-low pass filter that doesn't work or something, and you can only read half the drive. You can't read the other half. So that's why a lot of the testing tools, if there is one, there's like the Atola tests them, that'll test the 3 positions of the drive, because the board isn't working if you can't read one half of that. So I only buy Western Digital full drives. I don't buy anything else when I'm looking for a donor, and I'll start with a known good condition so I can test the board, make sure it's working, make sure the drive's working. But I feel completely comfortable buying a Hitachi board. They don't have that kind of problem. They generally are going to be working, but if I'm replacing one, something fried and it's probably got a little spot on it or something. And so look at the barcode, match those 2 rows, and then you can buy a board if you're just looking to replace the board. And that's the only thing that I think eventually I probably just need to send them an email and tell them add it to the site, because that's I think it's really the only thing anymore that's not up there. I do have a description at the end of book 1 that talks about families and where you can tell where the drives were sold to, OEMs, and where the family codes are and things like that. But they have the description of what you need to match a donor drive as opposed to the story on their site. Okay, so but consequently, and we are in book 2, and we are on page 3 in book 2. So the other reason I say eBay, I mean, just the whole point is you're still going to have to search for stuff on eBay. But let me tell you one other thing about eBay. First thing is you can only send 20 emails a day. So if you're on eBay and you're searching for a drive, you need to email the vendor, and you need to make sure that the drive they are selling is the drive you are getting. Because you're going to look through eBay, you're going to find a hard drive, and you're going to find serial numbers and stuff that match, and you're going to be like, that's great, that's what I need, I want to buy it. And you click buy, but then they send you another one. And they just said, oh, that was just a 20 gig hard drive. I just sold you a 20 gig hard drive. I didn't sell you that one. So you need to email them before you buy it, and you need to say, is this the drive I am getting? This is the one I want with this serial number and this model number. And I don't buy them until they send me back a yes or no response. If they do not send you back a yes or no response, then I'm not doing it. Okay? I'm not wasting time. I'm not going to try to package it back up, fight with eBay about what they sold me or what they didn't sell me, try to get my money back. And some of these things are $130. I don't want to do that. I want them to tell me, yes, this is what I'm going to send you. And then they'll also kind of be a little more friendly. Like, if you need any more with any other numbers on it, let me know, and I'll go look and see. Okay? So make friends with those guys who are doing that for hard drives, because they have warehouses full of them, and they might find them for you and go find them. They might not be the cheapest, but that's what you're doing. Good? Everybody understand? Since you can only send 20 a day, like I have a list, like I have like 80 hard drives I'm looking for all the time that might be rare hard drives. And so every day we search for 20 more. Every day we search for the next 20. Every day we search for the next 20, because we can only email 20 at a time. So we're searching for them. It's a constant process that we roll through. So, but we're doing that for free for people too. We're not charging them to search for their donor drives. When we find one, we just pass the cost on plus fees, whatever the fee is. So if you're charging stuff on credit cards and you're buying it for them, then you're going to have a 3.5% to 5% charge on your credit cards and shipping fees. So, because that's the way credit cards work. Even when you're in good shape, even when you do millions. My IT company, we did $1 million in sales a year. You still get shafted. You still are going to pay 2.75. You're never going to get away from that. They want your money. And it's probably my biggest fee. Every month right now, I probably pay between $700 and $1,400 a month in credit card fees every month. It's pretty big. So it's good to have a vendor. Square is good for short term. Square is not good for long term. Don't do Square long term at all. You'll get way better deals dealing with other companies. I'm using Payscape right now, but if you can go to somebody who goes to First Data, that's about the cheapest you can get, because that goes straight through to, because First Data is the major credit card vendor. But Payscape is the one that I'm using, but your fees will vary. So from a business perspective, if you got to take credit cards, that's the way I would go at this point. Now, other things to do, no matter what you've got as far as equipment and stuff goes, don't forget these things that we've already started to cover. PIO mode instead of DMA mode. Even if you're just using Windows, I showed you could set it to PIO mode to actually do a recovery. So if I get on a plane and I fly to another country and I don't have any tools with me, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go find a machine. If somebody hands me a hard drive, says do a recovery, I can go to, and that's the other advantage of making all my head combs and stuff out of trash. I can just go to CVS or pharmacy. I can buy some scissors, some tape, some pill containers, and I can make head combs. I can do screwdrivers. I mean, I think there's almost everything I can do. I can do tape for platters. I don't think I have to take anything. I might take a Deepspar if I could have one, but if I don't have that, I could use Linux. There are a lot of Linux distributions, and DD Rescue is one of the other ones that's out there. And there's somebody making a new version of DD Rescue. I'm trying to remember what it's called. It's something Super Clone or something like that, like Super HDD Clone DD Rescue Plus or something like that. But he's charging for it. He's actually got like a free and then a charge version, but it is an open source tool of some kind. So you may be in that gray area where you could use tools like that, but don't forget, so you have a lot of variations. The other thing is too, so in Windows, if we have a hard drive in a Windows system, and we plug it into another Windows system, and the Windows system blue screens or crashes, what happens in a lot of cases if I take that same hard drive and I go over to a Mac and I plug it into a Mac?
It might work.
It might work, and why? Why did it blue screen in Windows but not in a Mac or not in Linux?
Because a Mac doesn't need the drivers like
It's not quite about drivers, almost, but not quite. What?
It's reading the drive differently.
It is reading the drive differently. What is it reading? Why does Windows need it? Need other stuff that Mac and Linux don't need?
Because the other OS is basically hacked what Windows did without having the actual specs.
That's correct. That's what. So what happened actually is, so Mac and Linux don't respect all the NTFS tables. So they basically turned them off. They don't use them. They just kind of like said, screw that. Let's only, we reverse engineered, or we have a piece of it. And surprisingly, because Apple actually pays Microsoft for licensing fees for NTFS. They have an agreement, and they've been paying for it for almost 20 years now. Ever since Steve Jobs went back, they made an agreement with them, and that's why they actually have like embedded Linux, like Macs have Windows drivers, and they have since 2010 had exFAT drivers, because they've paid Microsoft a $300,000 licensing fee. So, but I don't think that's unusual. Microsoft and Apple basically are the same company right now. No one just realizes it. Like, they share so much between each other and they are in bed with each other, but Apple people don't like Microsoft, so Apple doesn't like to tell them about that. So, like for instance, iCloud. I mean, not exactly a perfect scenario, but iCloud. Do you know what iCloud runs on? Apple doesn't have those servers. Apple doesn't have a mail server anymore. They don't have a front end. They don't have any of that. You know what it runs on? It's running on Google. It's on the Google Cloud. It literally is right now. They pay Google $1 billion a quarter to store iCloud data. Google is in charge of your iCloud. Solaris is the front end of their mail servers. Solaris is running their mail servers. So all of the stuff you're using iCloud for their mail servers, I mean, and they've moved around a little bit. Every time they do like a major upgrade and tell you you've got to like migrate, that's what they're doing. They're moving to a new company every time that they do that. And they use, like, for instance, the iPhones. iPhones have any trouble at all reading Exchange Server? I mean, Exchange Server might be the best mail service on an iPhone. That's not a coincidence. They didn't just magically all of a sudden write a fantastic sync tool to do this. They paid for it. In 2007, they made an agreement with Microsoft and they paid for it, and they added active sync drivers in. Microsoft doesn't care if they ever sell another their Windows phone at all. They don't need it. They make more money off of the iPhone than they made off their own phone. I'm not kidding. This is really how that works. They have an agreement. So, which is also why Apple no longer, they killed Xserve and they killed all their other stuff because they had an agreement not to compete in the corporate arena with Microsoft. That's why they're not playing in that arena. They're not making mail servers and Xserves. So they are basically in cahoots with each other. They're in bed together. They're not going to step on each other's toes. So anyway, so keep these things in mind. Basically, that's what happens. You can take a hard drive from a Windows system. It has about 16 tables. Those tables have to work in order for Microsoft's systems to mount them. It's the agreement they made for security. So if you take a hard drive from a domain that doesn't belong to your computer, it should not mount it. The RID and the SID numbers are different. Microsoft will see it, it'll mount NTFS, then it goes to the security table and says, oh, you don't belong to me. Either mounts it as raw, or dismounts it altogether, or blue screens. And you come over to a Mac or Linux, all it does is see MFT. All it's looking at is the raw tables for volume, dirty bit, MFT, and ignores all the others, doesn't mount them. Because it can't. What's it going to do with security descriptors? It has no way of verifying them. It has nothing it can do with them. And Linux is even worse because Linux just reverse engineered all of it, and they just flip-flop everything so they don't have copyright issues. So they actually even take action differently on those tables altogether. You can tell a Linux system makes changes to a NTFS system because the flags that Microsoft changes, it changes different flags in different places so that it flags something as a deleted file or something else differently. It does not do the same thing. So, Seagate drives have serial ports, and the thing about Seagate drives is they'll tell you what's wrong with them. If you plug in a serial cable, I'm not talking SATA, I'm talking there's a 2-port cable. It comes with all 3 of the systems. It comes with the Atola, comes with Deepspar, comes with PC3000, plugs into a terminal. You plug it in, you'll actually see, just like your old modem, it'll actually show you. The drive will actually say, my heads are bad, I can't mount this, I have this table that's wrong, and it'll just be scrolling by with all the stuff that's going on the drive through a JTAG port. You can see it happen. So you can diagnose it without any of these other pieces of equipment. You plug in a serial port, you plug it into Hyperterminal, set your settings, and you can watch the Seagate do its job. Okay? So keep these things in mind as we're doing stuff. It's not the most efficient. But if you wanted to do that command guide that I gave you on the thumb drive, you can apply the commands directly to a Seagate hard drive. You can patch it. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. There's a way to do it. It's not easy. It's not 5 minutes. If you have a PC3000, it's 5 minutes. So those are your trade-offs. How much time do you want to spend? But you can do it for free. You can literally patch drives for free. It just takes you more time. And never ever change anything. Run ScanDisk. Run... this is my say no to spin right. Don't make changes to the drive at all. This, I would think I'd never have to say, never ever recover your data back to the same drive. I see people do that. It's a terrible thing. Like, I'm recovering my Outlook PST file, but I'm writing it back to, because I have 2 gigs of space over here on my hard drive. No kidding.
They partition it. And have an extra drive later that appears. Oh, copy that.
Oh yeah, I'm just going to make some free space. Like, that's your unallocated space. You're actually overwriting what you're actually trying to recover. Always recover to a different drive. Never write anything to that local drive. Never do anything. Never use the drive you want to recover from. I get that phone call. I got to do payroll tomorrow at noon, but before I do that, I need to print out like 75 documents and make some PDFs, and I need to save all my bank records. Like, no, stop. You're deleting all your data. You just don't realize that you're overwriting all your stuff. and don't boot the system. I see people do this. It starts to boot and it says something like, you know, NT loader not found, and then they go, oh, that's bad, I'm going to rip the heads out. Like, no, you're in software. You've made it to NT loader. That means you made it through firmware, you made it through the drive, you're actually trying to boot, and no changing of the heads is going to solve that problem. So I see things like this all the time. I don't delete the original drive or reuse that. As you know, I told you yesterday in my process, and if I'm starting with my process as a whole to make sure that everybody knows the whole data recovery scenario, comes into the office, documented, I told you all that, labeled, everything's labeled, put in a box, all the exterior stuff, laptops, drives, equipment, anything else that's not being recovered goes in a box. Allison maintains it, labels it, keeps it together, writes it down on the customer sheet so she knows she has it. So when she goes to ship things back out, she goes back to that sheet and says, what do I have? Do I have everything? Let's send it back out. And then the drive goes to the tech. The tech follows everything through with paperwork. It's numbered. He sends an email to the client, says, you know, here's a directory listing. This is what I've recovered. Do you want to pay for it? Yes, no. Then says yes. Then that drive that is the clone and the original drive go together to the logical side where we're recovering everything. The one that's the clone gets plugged into a Windows machine. All the stuff gets written to a server. So now I've got that copy. So I've got 3 total. Original drive, clone, and then a logical copy or a logical image, because I can also make an in-case image or whatever else I want. So I've got 3 copies. Client says, yes, I want it. Supplying me a hard drive, or I buy a hard drive. So then once I say yes, we charge the client, we go get the hard drive, we plug that in. I'm almost always, I'm going to say 99% of the time, I get the money before I release or pay for anything for the client. So if they want a donor drive and we had to get a donor to fix it, I send them the list or I tell them how much it's going to cost. I charge the client before I buy the donor. That might be seconds away. It might be like charge the client, says successful, buy the hard drive. If it's not always successful. Cards today, especially against computer companies, they do everything they can to say no as much as often as possible. It's also very common, like when people try to pay for my class, that they get declined because of who I am, not because of who you are, because who I am. They don't like companies that are computer companies. They think they're scams or something, so they don't like anybody charging anything. So you have to call the company and say, I'm going to charge this credit card 75 cents or whatever, is it okay? And you have to tell them to add that to the list. So I had to do that for you? Yep. It happens all the time. It's a normal thing every time a credit card comes through. But that happens all the time. So, or credit cards have been stolen and then the number changes, they get a new credit card, and so I can't charge the client because their credit card's already invalid. So I'm not going to buy a donor drive and get stuck with $200 before I've already charged it. So that's my process. You can do whatever you want to do. But trust me, if you do all this work and then you give the client their data back, they don't pay you. Every time I trust somebody, even somebody who feels like they would be great, I'm saddened by the result. So it happens all the time, even out of the goodness of my heart. So I'm always screwed on that one. It's rare I actually get paid if I've done it out of the goodness of my heart. So keep all these things in mind, and then as the drive, then I go get a drive, we plug it in, we copy everything back to the drive, either the clone, the image, the content. Then I try, if the original drive is going to go back with the copy that they paid for, I keep the clone that I made labeled with their label on it on a shelf that's separate. So these are all the ones that are in process. 2 weeks from now, I will go look at those drives, and if I need a drive, then we email the guy and make sure he got the package in the mail. Are you okay with your recovery? Did you get everything you want? Blah, blah, blah. Then we erase the copy that we have, but we make sure they got it in their hands so FedEx didn't run over it in a truck or something like that. Okay? That's kind of the summary of my process. Now we're going to do the software part of that today. And then, so I don't reuse drives. I keep copies of drives. I'm also very careful with them from that standpoint to make sure that I'm not losing anything. I like to have 2 copies sitting around and then erase everything. They also don't, most people don't want you to keep it too long either. They don't want you to have it in your possession too long. but nothing ever gets out of my office so far. Mac Drive. Mac Drive is actually a fantastic product. I really like Mac Drive. It can actually mount a corrupt Mac partition. So you can have, Macs can't even fix their own partitions. They're terrible at trying to deal with HFS, which is maybe why they're going to APFS. But HFS gets corrupt all the time and won't mount. And Mac Drive is a tool that mounts HFS on a laptop. I actually have it on these laptops or on a PC. I have it on these laptops in front of you. You can plug in an HFS hard drive into the Windows system, and the box will pop up and say, I can see that your HFS is corrupt. Do you want me to mount it anyway? And you say yes, but you don't want it to repair it. So you have to set it to read only. But the problem is that Windows makes you reboot the computer if you set it to read only on the fly. So I do it when I install the tool. When I install the tool, I set everything to read only. I never let it repair it. I only let it mount it. Then I can extract all the files. And one of the other reasons I use Mac Drive is this. There are free tools like FTK Imager is a free tool. You can mount Macs in FTK and then extract the files. Except for one thing. If you have a symbolic file that has a character that does not match what is acceptable in a PC, like slashes for dates and things like that, they won't copy the file. It'll just quit on that file, and sometimes quit altogether, and will not copy the files at all. Mac Drive has a conversion, and if a character doesn't match a PC's character, it changes it to a dash. So you can do that on the fly. RStudios also does that. RStudios has a tool where you can say, I'm copying a Mac to a PC, change all the file names so that it'll be over here, it'll be on a PC, will be correct. File names are a real problem when you're coming from Linux or from a Mac and you're going to a PC, which all of your software is on PCs. There's very little software that exists in the Mac world or the Linux world for doing recovery. All your commercial software, no matter what file system, operating system you want to do, is on Windows. That's where the money is. Everybody understand? So you can keep saying let's use Linux to do recoveries, and you can for some free stuff, and there is some good stuff out there, but you're not going to do everything, I promise. You're not going to do hardly anything. Honestly, I can't live without Windows to do recovery from that standpoint. And there's people who hate it when I say that. They can't stand it. Most of the Mac software is ports of Windows software if it exists, and it's not very good at disk arbitration. So that's the other problem, is it locks the disk or holds the disk, and you can't do things to the disk sometimes. So anyway, so if you're using Macs, that's what you got to do. Don't forget about your backup. Yeah.
I think to remember there when, for forensic purposes, when you're converting like that, be sure it's documented.
Yes. If it's for forensics. Yeah. If it's forensics, you do have to be careful with the file names, and your links won't work anymore. So if you have like embedded content, they won't work anymore. But if it's that kind of situation, you can also make an image of your Mac, and then these are just the logical files I extracted. And then you'll have to keep your image file. But he's right, if you don't document or remember that, and it'll do it on the fly, so it doesn't necessarily tell you that it's doing it. It's pre-set up. You already set it up, and you already say, change this link. So every time you go to extract one, it's already going to do it without telling you. It doesn't say, I changed my file name. There's no log of it as far as I know either. I don't think either of those tools make a log. So you just have to know. Don't forget, you know what a horrible day is? When you tell a client, I just recovered all your data, you want to pay for it? They say yes, and then you go, oh, I was just kidding. I lost my data too, my hard drive died, and I don't have your copy anymore. Those are a bad day, I'm just going to say. So I don't trust RAID 5 anymore. I really need to change this word to RAID 6. So RAID 5 was really robust back in the day when drives were really good. Drives today are crap, and they're all made by the same 3 companies. So it doesn't matter if they say HP on them or it doesn't say HP. It's going to be made by Western Digital, Seagate, Toshiba. And they're shit. They're just terrible drives. So SAS drives are better than SATA drives. Also, SAS drives are downwardly compatible. Like a SATA can connect to a SAS controller. But you cannot connect a SAS drive to a SATA controller. You guys understand what I'm saying? So here's what you should do in doing RAID recoveries or doing any high-end recoveries from here on out. Don't buy SATA controllers anymore. Buy SAS controllers. A SAS controller will cost a little bit more money, but you can get some kick-ass SAS controllers for 50 bucks on eBay now. Like Adaptec controllers that used to be like $1,300, you can buy them for $50 now. And you can connect 8 or 16 drives to those. You can find a 32-port SAS controller and you can hook up 32 drives to a SAS controller. And if you have a RAID array come in that you want to work on, you can take 2 cards, put them side by side, and put 64 drives on if you want in the same system, and they won't fall off. They'll literally stay connected. Like all your other controllers, you put 8 drives on a SATA controller, you're lucky it can hang on. I'm telling you, it'll disconnect all the time. You try to do that USB, USB is supposed to support 128 devices. You ever seen 128 devices on a USB? No, because they fall apart. You put like 6 on there, oh, where'd that drive go? Right in the middle of your recovery. I promise. Every time. SAS controllers are the way to go, and so you can hook up so many drives on a SAS controller, and you can hot swap them if you want to. You can plug them in whenever you want and take them out. I don't recommend doing that live on recoveries, but I'm just going to tell you, RAID 6 is the way to go from here on out. You always use RAID 6, so you have the same thing as RAID 5, but one more parity stripe across all the drives, so you have an additional drive for redundancy. So if a drive fails, you have to have 3 dead drives before it doesn't work instead of 2. Because as soon as one drive dies and you replace that drive, it's got to rebuild within 24 hours. And if a drive dies before that's over, you lose your data. Understand my point? Bad news. Okay? Alright. So let's start talking a little bit about file systems. I'm doing everything I can to image every single sector possible, trying to make sure that I get them all good. But the Deepspar can actually do a logical recovery. It's meant to be and started out as physical. And the only other one that ever did that prior to that was PC3000. PC3000 had a data extractor mode, so you could do your physical and then switch over to data extractor, and you can actually see your logical, and it processed the file systems, which is really important. It's really awesome from that standpoint. So a Deepspar has a function that I did not show you yet. So I'm going to switch over and show you real quick what you can actually do. I don't know how much of this drive I've actually copied at this point to be able to do it for real. But so you guys saw me messing around with this drive for a while. You know that I have, you know, okay. Every once in a while, these things that travel, they just don't always. My set that travels is sometimes a little bit flakier, especially plugging and ripping stuff in and out all the time. So, so the whole point is that the Deepspar has a data mode. It can process your data and parse data logically. So you could actually build a tree of your data. Now, this is different than the tools that you've used before. So let's say if you've downloaded a piece of data recovery software, most of the time the first thing it starts to do is you say go scan a hard drive, and it sits there and plunders the drive. You can sometimes see it, like sometimes they show you like a log, reading a Word document, reading a picture, reading a blah blah blah. Then, you know, if it's a big drive like 4 terabytes, maybe it takes 3 days, and then it's finally done and builds you a tree, right? During the time period that that is happening, is it making a copy of your data?
No, it's just reading.
It's just reading from whatever drive you gave it. It doesn't make a copy normally. There's only one tool that does, and it's RStudios, but you got to tell it to do it. But they don't normally make a copy of your data while you're scanning and carving and looking for headers and looking for stuff. But RStudios version 6 and later has a mode where you can do both. It has a checkbox, and you can actually scan and image at the same time. But nobody else pretty much does that. So in the Deepspar's world, if I touch a sector, I copy a sector. I don't do anything if I haven't copied a sector while I've touched the sector. In the Atola, it always does the same thing. It's like there is an option. It will tell you and it will warn you. If you do this, you will be doing this without copying sectors, and that's dangerous. Do you want to revert back? So you can actually tell it to look at sectors and then it copies them at the same time. But it will let you switch modes if you want to, which is not always a good plan. And then the PC3000 always copies everything it touches. So no matter what happens. So on a Deepspar, now I don't know how much data and what I have and how much I've cloned or not cloned. But there is a data function. I'm getting into the drive. Now, this function works best under NTFS. There is a way to do Linux and HFS. So you can do Macs and you can do Linux, but you have to do those in the Windows tool. So the best thing to do is there's a network module. And if you have the network module loaded, it's like $350 on top of the Deepspar. And then you can connect to the Deepspar over a cable, over your network. And you can control the entire Deepspar from a Windows tool. If you're doing Linux or HFS, you have to use that. You cannot do it live on the machine or live on the laptop like I'm going to do with NTFS. It will do NTFS both ways without a cable. So I'm doing NTFS without it. Okay? Looks the same. It's just whether or not I have to unplug the drive or not. Okay? So now also in hex mode, home, F3, what kind of drive do I have? What is this?
Master boot record.
Right, master boot record. It's a bootable drive. I have 55AA, so I know I have a partition signature, so this looks good, and I have NTFS structure. Everybody good so far? This is now redundant, right? Okay. So this works with NTFS, so I barely copied. It doesn't matter if I've copied anything or copied less or anything. There's a function over here called the data function. I can select an imaging area, and it will allow me to decide, you know, what I want as far as tables and structure and those kind of things. There are other things that the Deepspar can do with fragments and searching for stuff. I'm not going to use these functions because there's a bug, and I don't believe in trying to use something that I know is buggy in that part. So I will skip parts of it. I'll show you which parts I won't use, but it has to do with file names again. If you have tick marks and slashes and things like that in file names, it can't find them correctly, so you think you're getting everything, but you're not. So I'm going to do the thing that lets me get everything. So select imaging area. What that does is that checks off a map. It goes and kicks off a map, and then it'll look at the partition structure. It'll copy those sectors. So it'll copy NTFS. It'll copy sector 63 over here. So this happens to be where this partition starts at sector 63. What would be the other location partitions normally start on Windows? You said it the other day. Seems like a blur now, doesn't it? Where's the other most common sector that they've always told you to go to? You said it a couple of days ago. Huh? Where's the new location for partitions to begin after Vista? 2048. 2048. So it, on older systems, XP and earlier, 63 is the sector, which is the 64th sector, and then 2048 on Vista and later, they moved the partition structure, and then it can exist anywhere. It can actually exist anywhere, but the default is 2048, right? So this is telling me right here, I'm starting a partition at this side, this is how big this partition is, blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to hit apply, and then I'm going to get a choice. So the Deepspar says, well, what do you want to do? What do you want to search for on this drive? Well, here's the thing. If it is FAT, if it was a FAT 32 or a FAT 16, you can't do the tables and all this other stuff. All you can do is the whole partition. So the only useful thing is most drives, the whole partition is the whole recovery, right? With one exception. Usually now, if you have like a Dell or something, they have a utility partition. Well, so you've got 20 megs you can ignore or something like that. But that's about it. But you can choose just to do a partition. I will tell you that the MFT mask, this is one of the ones that there's a bug in, and it does not work correctly. And I guess I need to really write something up and get them to fix it. But Like I said, there's a problem with file names. If you think you're choosing like *.doc, if there's tick marks and slashes and stuff in it, it doesn't select them correctly. So there are problems with this MFT mask. It pops up a box and asks you all these questions, but I know that it's missing files. I've tested it and gone through it a couple times. So the only one that I think is really correct is this one. I want to search for all files, indexes, and bitmap. Now that's 3 tables. There's a